Hey everyone, Brian Zane here. But you know what? We'll always be together, however far it seems. We'll always be together in Wrestledreams. It's time for my review of AEW Wrestledream 2024 from Tacoma, Washington this past weekend. It's hard to believe it's been a full year since last year's Wrestledream, the first one in Seattle, just a bit further up north. I got to go to that one with some friends, and that was definitely a fun time, but I'm glad to have stayed home this weekend and just, sat from the comfort of my own house instead of driving 5+ hours and back to go see this one. It was still a great show to watching with some friends and family. One thing I was very excited about from the get-go was that, of course, this might be a different response level depending on, how long you've been watching or how old you are. But Rico came back. Rico Constantino showed up during the 0 hour to be the third man for the MXM acclaimed matchup. And so we got a bit of a full circle moment with he and Billy Gunn after all those years with the fake gay wedding and everything. It's crazy to see Rico back because, it was only a few years ago where he had some real bad health problems and practically on death's door. So for him to have been in the kind of shape to come back and even do a spot like this is really cool and definitely a blast from the past and definitely was in line with, of course, the MXN gimmick. So I don't know if this is going to lead to more appearances for him down the line, but I think, we've seen a lot of, out of nowhere returns for a lot of wrestlers in the last couple of years, so why not? The show starts with Jay White versus Hangman Page, two people who I thought going into this really each needed a win because Jay White is back after his time off with injury and definitely needs the momentum. And meanwhile, you got Hangman Page, who after the big emotional win against Swerve at the previous pay-per-view, how is he going to take that and carry that story along as time goes on? So I think it was definitely kind of a must-win matchup for both guys, but they really, and they acted like it too, because this was a tremendous opening contest. Kind of a split crowd for this one too. Definitely a lot of dueling pro and anti-Hangman chants throughout this matchup here. One thing I thought was interesting, it kind of sets the tone for pretty much the rest of the night. Hangman be spitting. There's a lot of spit on this show. Every once in a while when you watch a wrestling show, it's AEW or WWE or what have you, you might pick up on some of patterns over time. Sometimes there's too many destroyers. Sometimes too many bumps on the apron. And then my big thing that I noticed with this show, it's a lot of people are just spitting at others. One of my favorite moments are these upside down chops as Hangman's hung by his leg on the turnbuckle. Hangman comes back with his powerbomb on the apron, then the ring steps. Ugh. On the ramp, Jay White is backing off, then hits Hangman with the biggest loogie I've ever seen, splats on Page's stomach. I thought that was a symbiote at first, or Jay's been saving that one for the last couple of hours before he hit Page with it. That was gross. The match continues. Jay practically spikes Page with a suplex, then hits the Deadeye. Some crazy back and forth for an opening matchup. But Hangman's knee is a problem. When he tries to go for the buckshot, Jay White catches him, hits the Blade Runner to win, and Juice Robinson celebrating with him. Look at those gold cowboy boots. I give this 4 stars out of 5. This was a really great way to kick off the show. Like I said, two guys with something to prove, really just tearing the house down early on. It was going to be tough for the other matches to follow it, I think. I didn't really have a dog in the fight as to which one I thought was going to be more of it makes more sense for the guy to win. I was predicting Hangman to win, just again based off of what happened with the Swerve storyline, where again both guys needed to win. I was just a little surprised where does Hangman go from here, because this was Jay White winning clean as a sheet here, and I think that this is something where's Hangman going to turn off from here, because based on what we see at the end of the show, I think the battle lines are being drawn and Hangman's not really part of that conversation at the moment. So after this big transcendent heel turn, this big moment he had, you want to see some more of him, I would think. And of course, but like I said, Jay White needs that momentum as well. And now that he's back and he wins this match, it's good for him. So yeah, I'm just very curious as to see where both of these guys are going to land in the next month or two. Hey, I forgot to turn my backlight on. Well, it is Sunday morning, so I wasn't quite with it, so I apologize for that. Next matchup is for the AEW Women's Championship as Mariah May defends against Willow Nightingale, who, if I didn't know any better, I'd say she was rocking some Akira Hokuto-inspired gear here. Early on, Willow doing this cartwheel, Mariah's like, F that, but Willow comes back with a big old pounce early on. Nightingale at one point biting Mariah's ear to break free from a hold. A few minutes later, May has got Willow in this Indian deathlock, but Willow's just driving Mariah into her own knee. Hell yeah, that was great. Willow missing a big moonsault, Mariah hitting Mayday, we get a kick out. There's a big Hurricane Rana attempt from the top rope by the end. Mariah's going for the Hurricane Rana, Willow blocks it, thinks she's gonna hit a power bomb. We get this big moment where the crowd is like alive for it, but Mariah ends up completing the move, hits a Hurricane Rana, big knee to the face, Storm Zero to win and retain the title. I also give this match 4 stars out of 5. This was a match that really exceeded my expectations. I think that this was, I think that Willow has really shown to be a really strong, consistent performer. You put her in a hardcore match, you put her in a straight-up wrestling match, and she's going to deliver, and the fans are going to be into it. So I still think that, I'm still very much on board the Willow train, and I hope that she does get another shot at the women's title soon at some point. I think Mariah is doing well from an in-ring perspective, but I wish that story-wise that her angles were as captivating post-title win as it was pre-title win and the build to get there. Not to say that she's being booked poorly, because obviously she's being booked very strong, and I like her character on its own, but I feel like until Toni Storm comes back from her little international excursion that she's on, I'm wondering, again, thinking about that next step and thinking about what the payoff is going to be. Who's the next one to challenge Mariah May? And if it's not Toni Storm, or after Toni Storm comes back, who could it be? Could we go back to Willow? I'm not sure. Again, I think it's kind of a difference between the wrestling stuff and then the storytelling stuff. I think that in a quick turnaround, they were able to tell a convincing story with Willow going for the belt here and the way she was jumped on the Go Home Dynamite and then came back and pounced Mariah and cut that promo with the busted lip or whatever. But yeah, good short-term thing, but let's see what the future holds for Mariah next. For the TNT Championship, Jack Perry defends against the wrestler Katsuyori Shibata, and this match starts out really well, starts out with all the graps between both of them. It's not too long though before Jack starts going for the eyes. Shibata's countering with some loud-ass chops. They really reverberate throughout the arena in the Tacoma Dome. At one point, Shibata does that thing where he sits down and kind of meditates, and Jack just spits in his face. Come on, guys, enough with the spitting. Suplex spine first into the ring apron is one of the more brutal moves here by Shibata as he's making his comeback. More big strikes by the challenger, a big old corner drop kick. But the ending here kind of pissed me off. He goes for a rear naked choke. He brings Perry down, but Jack just lands on top of him with a cover. 1, 2, 3. Shibata's pinned, and it's over. Wow, Shibata, the wrestler, he looked really dumb with that finish. Jack didn't even do anything. He just fell on top of Shibata. And so that was the cover and that was the ending there. So I didn't think that made Shibata look very good at all. But after the bell, Jack retains. After the bell, he goes for some more damage. And then we get Daniel Garcia coming out to a big pop. Perry powders, and then we hear MJF's music playing. And we haven't seen him since Garcia took him out after their match at the last pay-per-view. So MJF comes out, we get a stare down. Perry decks Garcia from behind with that hand-smelted belt. And it almost looked like he was going to shred his knee on the come down too. The way he followed through and fell, oh, that's a torn ACL. We're not going to see him for 9 months. But he was fine. He leaves. And then MJF grabs the mic. He runs down the Seattle Supersonics, which of course you don't want to do that in the Seattle area. It's bad news, man. People don't like that getting brought up. But he says he found the Dynamite Diamond ring at a pawn shop in Buffalo, and now he's going to make Garcia kiss it. So before he can do that, though, suddenly we hear Adam Cole's music. He makes a run down, and when he was sprinting, oh no, I hope he doesn't shatter his ankle again, but he sprints down to the ring. He gets in there, MJF leaves, Cole does the poses, the taunts, everyone chants along. Adam Cole's over big here. And that's the end of that segment. I'm going to give the match that we saw, going back to that thing, I'm going to go to the match like 2.5 stars. It was fine, and then the ending just kind of like was very flat. Not a lot of heat behind it, I don't think. Again, only heat's on Shibata because it didn't make him look good. And then we had the return parade, which I think made up for that kind of down moment, with MJF coming back and then Adam Cole coming back was very exciting. Obviously, Cole's been out for a long time with that ankle injury. It put him out for like over a year. And now it seems that he's back enough to get into a fight with MJF again. But it is very confusing because if you go back to, how the storyline began, it was with, Adam Cole turning on MJF, who was a babyface. So Cole turned heel, but he was hurt. And so then you had the Undisputed Kingdom kind of like doing some stuff while MJF was off, by the way. And then MJF comes back, Cole's still hurt. MJF was a babyface and splats Cole, who's still a heel, and now time has passed, MJF is a heel again. Adam Cole comes back as a babyface, which is fine, but like Cole was definitely the bad guy in that storyline when the split initially happened and the betrayal at World's End. And also, like, what does this mean for the Undisputed Kingdom, who are still very much heels at this point? Like, they were formed specifically to take out MJF, and now they're just there. So where's Cole gonna fit in to that structure there? And it is just kind of funny that the face heel role, it's been reversed. I think the fans wanted that from the beginning, because that is how the storyline began, was MJF was a heel and Cole was a babyface. And so now they're kind of back to the way it was. But it was a confusing road to get there. And again, it's all bogged down by really unfortunate injuries and people taking time off. So that's a storyline that I think was much better and more clear in the first draft than it was in the final draft when it all came out. In our next matchup, triple threat for the international title as Will Ospreay defends against Ricochet and Konosuke Takeshita. This was a really fantastic match. I think it easily, in terms of just like highlight reel value and the stuff these guys were doing, you could easily say this is match of the night. One of my favorite parts is at the very beginning when Ricochet and Ospreay do the thing again, the superhero pose, and Takeshita is like, none of that. Fuck all that. And then he produces Chekhov's table on the outside very early on. We won't see that for a while, though. Another cool moment is that it takes 2 Sasuke specials to take Takeshita down. Ricochet goes for one, and Konosuke catches him, and then Ospreay hits another one, and he goes tumbling down. But Konosuke is a great spoiler for these two, because he's very agile, like the both of them, but he also has that size advantage, and he's got the power behind those forearms that splat and just echo throughout the arena. I think he was a great just kind of counterweight to Ospreay and Ricochet and the flips and the dips they would do. We get big spots on the apron here, one after the other. Rico hitting Ospreay with what I can only describe as a super backslide. I've never seen that before. There's a great sequence with all 3 guys just slamming the hell out of each other. There's a great part where Ospreay and Rico decided to join forces, and Takeshita's like, what? Who could have foreseen this? Ospreay flipping through this massive lariat. He hits an Oz cutter. Ricochet then splats him out of nowhere with a 450, almost pins him. And then there's this part where everyone just kind of stops selling for a minute. And this part almost took me out of it because everyone gets dropped on their heads. It's fighting spirit on fighting spirit. And I can get that, in small doses, but when it's this whole chunk of everyone's doing it, it does kind of stand out to me. And speaking of standing, just like Paul McCartney, we all stand together as Ospreay hits a top rope Hurricane Rana, and then Rico lands into Takeshita's arms into a roll-up. That was very impressive once they pulled it off. Shooting star by Ricochet, Takeshita with a knee, this double pin, and there's a kick out. Takeshita grabbing Rico, crunching him down through the table on the outside. Don Callis, who at this point's been doing commentary for the match, he gets up, he yoinks the referee out of the ring, and he gives the telltale screwdriver to Ospreay to tell him to finish the job, but Ospreay wants none of it. He's had enough. He's going to put Callis in the Tiger Driver 91, but then suddenly Kyle Fletcher shows up and just stabs Ospreay in the back of the head with a screwdriver. That was brutal looking, but then Takeshita hits the knee, we get the cover and the win. New international champion, and after the bell, Fletcher hitting the Tiger Driver on Ospreay to add insult to injury. No second thoughts there by Fletcher. I give this one 2.5 stars. Can you imagine? I'll give this one 4.5 stars out of 5. This is my favorite match of the evening, even in spite of the moments where sometimes they no-sell a little too much, or sometimes they stand still before a move a little too much, and maybe like the camera could have caught a better angle where we don't see that so obviously. But even with those moments, it was still just a big knocky-draggy. It was still full of exciting moments. I've seen some people say that this was comparable to, AJ Styles, Christopher Daniels, Samoa Joe at Unbreakable. And I think there's a valid point. It's a valid comparison because you got these guys who are really pushing the limits and telling a story while they're doing it. And there's a twist at the end as well. It's very well done. And these three have just incredible chemistry. I was worried that, Ospreay and Ricochet together, that's one thing. We see that on TV now. And I thought Takeshita being thrown into it might have been like a crowbar. Like it might have made it not work. But boy, I was wrong because those three together delivered a really just incredible matchup. And also Takeshita's the champion. I had a feeling because, last month when he was in the Continental Championship 4-way, I said to myself, well, he just kind of sticks out to me in this one because, of all the people in this matchup, he's the one doing the least. And I was hoping then that, okay, well, hopefully this will lead to something more. This kind of the rebooting of Takeshita after they kind of dropped the ball with him over the last 6 or 8 months. And so my prediction was correct. I thought that he might be the dark horse in this one to win. And sure enough, he did it. And this feels like a big reinvigoration of the Don Callis family. I do wonder where Lance Archer was in all this, because didn't we see a big talent exchange or something where Don Callis bought him from Jake Roberts and now Jake Roberts is with LFI? So I was wondering where Archer was in that beatdown, because clearly it's everyone else who has the beef with Ospreay at this point. He's a very late joiner to the party. We get this backstage promo with Jerry Lynn talking to Orange Cassidy, and he's offering him some advice and saying, hey, you could be the man. And then he walks away, and Hook then just kind of walks in and says, listen to Jerry, you could be the man. And during this promo, by the way, I don't know if somebody was operating a table saw in the background, because it was kind of hard to hear what the talent was saying, because you just underneath what was going on. But yeah, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to me in the moment, but it does make more sense as the show goes on. And we'll get to what it all means. But we do have next the return of Swerve Strickland. First time we've seen him since the prior pay-per-view, and comes out to a big reception in his hometown of Tacoma. Prince Nana introduces him and briefly stumbles and calls him the Forever Ring of Honor World Champion before he corrects himself and says AEW Champion. So Swerve announces that he's medically cleared. Then we get the recently debuting MVP and the more recently debuting Shelton Benjamin showing up to interrupt. MVP talks up Swerve, says he gave him a bunch of advice back in the day, but says that his career has been stagnating lately. Swerve does bring up their match in Defy at 2017, which is a Seattle-based organization, so of course that gets a big pop, and a Defy chant from the crowd there. I thought it was pretty cool. So Swerve basically, puts over MVP. He puts over Shelton Benjamin in a big way. Kind of basically says, you helped pave the way for me and so many other black wrestlers to achieve so much in this business. And I think that's a really great moment that they had there for Swerve to tell him that in this kind of open forum. And nice to see that he got his flowers. Swerve is thinking about his decision about who to represent him, and he weighs the options. He says, Nana, you're still a handful. You're still selling weed to high school kids at the hotel after the show and everything. But despite your screw-ups, Nana, you're family, and I don't turn my back on family. So he has this moment where he stands up for Nana. He's planted his flag, and then Shelton Benjamin, in a bit of a rare mic time for him, basically warns Swerve about this and saying, you're either with us or you're against us. And before long, it turns into a scuffle, and you see security and referees coming to break it up. So they're getting pulled apart, and that's the bit. I think a lot of people were expecting for maybe Bobby Lashley to show up here, because that is the rumor, the report that he has signed with AEW, and it does seem that between MVP and Shelton coming back and being brought back together, that they are really going to be maybe pushing this renewed Hurt Business, the Hurt Syndicate, as it were. And so maybe Lashley didn't show up on Saturday, but that's not to say he won't show up at some point, and I wouldn't be surprised if it happens maybe on TV this week. But I think it's still really cool for, for MVP and Shelton to be back together, and if Bobby Lashley joins them, that's cool. I mean, the Hurt Business, I think, is a huge what if from the WWE in the last several years. I think that was a really big dropped ball when they were put together and they had this push and they had belts, and then they had nothing, and then they got broken up for no reason. And so I would like to see what happens if somebody else gets the keys to that and see what they can do with it. I mean, it can't be any worse than what WWE did with it. So I'm open to seeing where this goes. And hey, it's pretty cool that I got to call one of the few independent matches that Shelton Benjamin had between leaving WWE and joining AEW. I'll keep that feather in my cap, and it was really cool to see him back, and I hope he gets some good opportunities here as well. Up next, 2 out of 3 falls match as Hologram takes on the Beast Mortos, aka Frank Mortos, attorney at law. This matchup here is just chock full of, I hate to sound trite, but the phrase good lucha things definitely comes to mind when I watch this matchup here, because these guys are all over the place when they're wrestling here. I mean, the way that Hologram hits that tope, that first tope on the outside, it's just so cool. Some crazy flips by Hologram here. He counters out of a press slam attempt off the top, hits this crazy crucifix bomb, and rolls Beast up for the first fall. Then Mortos later flies out of the ring, twists himself in midair. That was crazy. Then, like, one of the most devastating moves of the match was like the least lucha move of them all. He just like body slams Hologram onto the ramp, but the angle which he does it and the sound it makes is this horrifying like thud. Mortos win the second fall here, and man, some of the risks these guys are taking throughout the match are just ridiculous. We get a poison Rana on the apron. Mortos does end up hitting that press slam off the top after a while. Ultimately though, Hologram hits a big spinny slam to get that final pinfall and keep his unbeaten streak alive. I give it 4 stars out of 5. I mean, this match, watching here, takes me back legit to like WCW cruiserweights, like 96, 97 shit, man. Like, they were doing some real fun stuff. And yeah, Lucha Libre, man, it's not the kind of style that it takes getting used to, is Lucha Libre style. But once they hit that rhythm and once they start hitting all their stuff, man, like, it can be some really spectacular action. And I think that they absolutely delivered. It was a match that feels like a little underbaked if you're not watching Collision, for instance. But I think, not every match needs to have that kind of like, oh my gosh, 18 weeks of storytelling or whatever. And I think you just gotta have a badass cruiserweight match, Lucha Libre, man, and they did it. Next matchup sees Darby Allin, another one of Washington State's favorite sons, taking on Brody King. And Darby's entrance, actually, there's a bit of a preamble with it where there's a video package of him, skateboarding at a skate park and, sketching on the back of a bus. Big love letter to Tacoma in this video package here. And then he comes out and immediately eats it on the stage during his entrance. There's fighting on the outside early on. Brody just shoots Darby out of the sky when he's leaping off the steps and takes this hellacious bump on the floor. A really badass moment where Brody puts the steps on top of Darby and then walks up the steps and poses up top. That was just badass. What a moment. Darby's in the Tree of Woe at one point. He sits up in time to avoid a cannonball, follows up with a crazy dive. Darby with a chokehold on Brody over the ropes. Nice throwback to when that happened in that Rampage Royal a couple of years ago, but Brody fights back and squishes him on the apron. Brody with this crazy German suplex off the top rope, followed by another one. Brody is on the top rope again. Darby fights off and gives him a wave goodbye and shoves him, and Brody takes this big trust fall, this big flat back bump on the side of the steel steps that had been stood up by that point, and that was just a crazy bump to see. Then Darby coffin drops him on the steps, and Brody barely avoids getting counted out, but walks right into another coffin drop by Darby, and Allin wins the matchup. I'm going to give it 3.5 stars out of 5. It was a very hard-hitting matchup. Very exciting, though. I think it was just the right amount of brutality. I think it was a matchup that these two are really suited for, and again, some of the bumps these guys took between the two of them were pretty ridiculous. I had a lot of fun with this one for sure. Tag team title match next as the Young Bucks defend against Private Party. I mean, this is a story that goes way back to the first year of AEW, and they talk about that here, where a Private Party, who were young and unknowns at the time, like they upset the Young Bucks in the first round of the tag title tournament, and that's really a high that Private Party has been trying to chase ever since the last 5 years or so. And so we get this intro with the Bucks. I love the outfits they're wearing this time around, all the paisley designs on Nicholas's gimmick, Matthew with all the pearl necklaces. Private Party, they get a little video package before their entrance where you've got the Amazing Red hyping them up. That was their trainer, and it was cool to see Red get a moment on this show. It's cool anytime you see Amazing Red get, some recognition in these latter years for all he did during his prime as well. Before the match begins, the Bucks get on the mic and Matthew runs Private Party down. He says you'll be nothing but a mid-card act, and the closest you'll get to these belts is you sniffing them right there. And so then the fight starts off, and they fight their way up to the stage. Mark Quinn climbing the top of the set, doing this big plancha onto everyone. I'm pretty sure he hit Zay harder than the Matthew or Nicholas there. Private Party goes on a big run. We get the Hardy Boys tribute as well. I love this rebound off the powerbomb into a Hurricane Rana they do as well. Holy crap. All four guys going crazy, go nuts on the outside. Private Party hit Gin and Juice on Nicholas, but we get a kick out here. Private Party looking strong as hell for a good part near the end of the matchup here. Ultimately, the Bucks win with a TK driver on Zay for the win, and so the Bucks retain, and we have this moment where Private Party is very sad. They get this adulation and respect from the crowd, and I'm thinking, are they splitting up? Are they splitting up? No, they don't split up here. But it was an emotional moment. I'm going to give this 4 stars out of 5. I think this was a great matchup that had a lot of, callbacks to the previous stuff they'd done, and the amount of sympathy that Private Party garnered in this matchup through the match itself and through the commentary, I think did a great job in building them up as, potential world beaters. It does suck that the Bucks ran them down. You're gonna be mid-carders for life, and then they don't win. That would have been a great redeeming moment, and so now you've kind of pegged them oh, well, you're right, they can't win them. So, and the way they did that kind of emotional moment after the match makes me think, well, maybe there is one more chance left. They have one more shot to do it, and that's kind of what that was gonna lead into. But I do think it was one of Private Party's best matches for a while. I think they and the Bucks do extraordinarily well together. So, but where does Private Party go from here after the big loss and after being told they're mid-carders and they lose, and what happened? There's my dog walking in and shaking. Thank you, Riley. Here, you want to come here? Come here. Come here, baby girl. Yes. Oh, Riley, baby. Oh, what a sweetheart. Oh, give me kisses. Look at the baby. Oh, this should be my thumbnail, and maybe I'll get more people to watch. Okay, I love you. What kind of smell? In your semi-main event, Chris Jericho hopes to regain the ROH World Championship when he challenges Mark Briscoe. And I know that, part of the heat in the build-up for this was Jericho invoking the name of Mark's late brother Jay. And I know that people kind of disagreed with that. And it can be kind of a sticky subject, especially the nature of how Jay died. But it was, I think I've said this before when this has come up, but I think that as long as all the parties consent to it, I think that, invoking that sort of thing to get additional heat or sympathy, depending on the what side of the angle they're on, I think that can work, And I think that I don't think it's any different than when Jericho was ragging on Dean Malenko's dead dad Boris in 1998. It worked for him then to get heat, and I think we all kind of remember 98 being a pretty good year for Jericho, and so I think that it wasn't that beyond the pale when he did it here. But we do see that kind of take form a little bit later in this matchup. I do have to apologize. I was a little distracted as this match began because the Oregon-Ohio State game was just wrapping up, and we literally had 2 monitors for a moment in my office. We had one watching the show, but every once in a while I'm kind of looking, oh, there's the game. And then Oregon won, and that was a big fun moment. So then I had to settle and then kind of okay, we'll watch the match now. We can focus on this. So yeah, it was a good match as was going on. Briscoe goes on this big run early on, but you got Big Bill just hitting him with a big honking boot on the outside. But then Orange Cassidy makes the save. He just Superman punches Big Bill all the way up the ramp to get him out of there. A lot of back and forth between these two as the match is going on. Mark is on the ropes at one point, and then Brian Keith, the Bad Apple, he shows up and gets a cheap shot on Mark here. And then Rocky Romero, the other member of the conglomeration, makes the save. A chair comes into the picture for another time in this matchup. Mark does his plancha off the chair to the outside through a table. Really good stuff here. Jericho hits the Judas effect, but he takes his time, really drinking it in, and then he wants to really, rub it in. So he's going to hit the Jade Driller. He looks up at the sky. He ends up hitting the move. And you think, oh, Jesus, not this way. And then Mark does kick out to this big pop. Nigel McGuinness at this point in the match, implying that Jimi Hendrix is A, wrestling fan, and B, looking down on this match with a lot of pride. Like, okay, I know we're in Washington, but all right, settle it down. Mark does end up winning the match with a Jade Driller of his own to win and retain, and I'm going to give this 3.5 stars, and I'm going to say good. I'm glad that Briscoe won this one. I didn't want that reign to end just yet, and I don't think Jericho needs another belt, doesn't need to be the Nueve. I think that this was fine. It was a fine match, and Mark Briscoe getting the big win, a big pay-per-view win, nonetheless. Beyond that, I think that was great for him. In your main event, Bryan Danielson defends the AEW World Title against Jon Moxley, and this match starts off in grand style. It starts off with a big brawl, as the final countdown continues to play for the first couple of minutes of the matchup, New Jack style. Very cool. Brian Busaiku's a chair into Moxley's face very early on, hits all the big moves. You think the match is going to end really early, but it doesn't. And there's a big "fuck you Moxley" chant as this match goes on, because Moxley hits Brian with a pile driver on the announce table. And so he's really showing he means business here. Slaps the headset off of Nigel McGuinness at one point. This is a crazy matchup because it gets to the point where even Danielson's most ardent hater in Nigel starts to feel sympathy and starts to feel bad, and dare I say even root for Danielson a little bit in this matchup. Moxley just beats the heck out of Brian for a long time in this matchup here. He hits the stomps. We get some knees by Marina Shafir. She's cheating a lot for Moxley here. She peels back a lot of the padding to expose the concrete. One of the MVPs of this show was the guy in the front row with the Ricky Martin tour shirt, just yelling at Moxley, "That's your fucking brother! That's your fucking brother!" Moxley digging his nails into Brian's back, tears off the kinesio tape, biting his back even, but Danielson, he bites back. They're trading big blows. We get the yay boos, or actually it's the yes nos. They're just beating the hell out of each other. Marina Shafir gets involved again and gets ejected. Danielson is now doing the kicking and the stomping, but Moxley comes back, catching him on the outside, drops him onto the concrete. Danielson with a couple more knees. We get kickouts. Danielson kicks out at one point, and then defiant to the last, Danielson, once again, we get the spit. Moxley hits a Gott-style pile driver and then follows up with a rear naked choke, and when he gets Brian back, the referee calls it. There's no tap out, there's no pass out. Remsburg makes the call, and immediately after the bell, he just has this look of damn it, this remorse on his face, knowing that he just ended Danielson's career by making that call, his full-time career and everything. So then Moxley and his maybe not skinhead stable come out to celebrate, and they put the championship in a duffel bag. They don't even show it off that much. They put it in the duffel bag. They're going to run away with it, and then they want to do, Moxley presents the plastic bag. Wheeler Yuta and Darby Allin come out. It seems to make the save, but no, it goes from Wheeler Yuta to Weiler Yuta because he betrays Darby as well. They duct tape Darby to the ropes, and suddenly Yuta is handed the plastic bag, and now he starts bagging Brian. And Jesus, can anyone come out to help this poor guy? Out come Private Party and Jeff Jarrett. They run up and get taken out. Then the baddies Pillmanize Danielson's neck with a steel chair. Finally, more wrestlers and security break it up. Where the hell were they? They do the stretcher job for Danielson, and there's this hush over the arena. You can hear a pin drop. It's a stunned silence. The wind has been taken out of their sails. And you get this final shot of, Darby looking absolutely despondent with himself because he couldn't save Danielson. And there's, Orange Cassidy, and you see Hook and Daniel Garcia in the shot too. And then just before the shot fades to black, that final moment of the baby faces looking sad, you hear, "Here comes the money." I'm kidding. No, that didn't actually happen. No, Shane McMahon did not appear on this show in any capacity. But boy, the rumor mill loves to keep churning that nugget out. I'm going to give this one, I'm going to give it 4.5 stars out of 5. I was going between that and 4, but I just love this match, man. I think it was a great physicality, great story being told, kind of a shocking end, and then even more shock beyond that, with Yuta, the one guy who's been standing up for Danielson this whole time, finally kind of accepting his fate and then just, joining up with the Blackpool Combat Club, looking very sad as he's suffocating his former mentor. And now, you got this thing where the battle lines have been drawn. I've seen a lot of people just dogpile this ending of the show where they're saying, Danielson should have rode off in the sunset. He should have had his moment. Danielson's had a lot of moments in his career, right? He had his first retirement in Seattle. He had his comeback. He had his moment at Wembley Stadium. He's had a lot of moments. And I think if there's one person who's kind of sick of having all those moments, it's probably Danielson. I think he's a guy who has been very selfless throughout his career, and I would bet you anything this was the ending he booked. He probably wanted it to go down this way. What better way to put tremendous heat on the new champion? It's not enough they just beat him up. They got to get him stretchered off. It's not just the end of his full-time career. It could be the end of his career after everything that happened there in the story. Because Danielson will come back. It's the end of his full-time run. He's not done. And I think that this is a great way just to put more heat on Moxley's new group and just, you kind of show the distinction of here are the baddies and here you see that. You see that with the baby faces, that last shot. It's Darby. It's Garcia, it's Hook, it's Orange Cassidy. That's the seeds they were planting earlier when Jerry Lynn was talking to Orange, and Hook was part of that conversation. And I think this was just a really good piece of business. Not every pay-per-view needs to have a happy ending, It doesn't need to have that. Sometimes there's sad endings, and sometimes the hero, the home state hero, gets the dog crap beat out of him and Pillmanized, and he's laid out on a stretcher. And that's how you build heat for somebody to eventually beat, Moxley and get the belt off him. That's storytelling, baby. And it's not a happy ending per se, but Bryan Danielson, he's had those happy moments in his career. I think this wasn't the ending, this was the epilogue. Wembley was the final act, really. So I don't disagree with how they did this. I think it was very powerful, and it was very well done, and it's setting up a lot of stuff for the future. And I think that's really all you could ask for at the end of a pay-per-view. So I'm going to give this year's Wrestledream an A-. I thought that all the matches that we saw were pretty great. The only real negative I had on the whole show was just the ending of Perry and Shibata. And before that, it was a fine match, right? But I think a lot of stuff made up for it. So many good matches. Even the opener was fantastic. The tag title match was great. The triple threat for the International Championship, that is probably going to be one of the match of the year contenders. And Willow versus Mariah was fantastic as well. There's so many good matches on this show, and they set up a lot of things for the future. We had the return parade, with guys like MJF and Adam Cole. We saw this big heat moment at the end with the championship. Darkest timeline. Danielson's out of the business and crippled, and Moxley's new group is leading the pack, and still who is pulling the strings? Maybe it is Shane McMahon, but we aren't going to find out here on this show. Again, if that does happen, that's kind of a weird pivot. I don't like that idea. I really hope that's not the case, what happens here. I don't think you need to have a McMahon in AEW in any capacity, but we will see what happens. I don't know, but I think that the show itself was just great. There wasn't, not a bad match on that show. Something for everyone. This was a great show for sure. But what did you think about Wrestledream, folks? I want to hear about it in the comments section below. Be sure to give the video a thumbs up if you like it. Subscribe to Wrestling with Regret. Hit the bell icon for all the notifications. And hey, just giving you a little programming note, later this week, my big video is going to be a countdown featuring the worst moments of The Rock's WWE career. And since he just recently came back to WWE at Bad Blood, it's a bit timely. And so we're going to explore some of those not so savory moments of The Rock's career up to this point. But until then, folks, I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.